Okay, so there's been some interesting changes to the Necromancer Tower. So, firstly, it previously was said that this was going to be a Halloween tower that only returns during Halloween. No, it is now the case that the Necromancer is now a permanent hardcore tower. So it was originally in the exclusive part of the store. Now it's in the hardcore section. So it is now a hardcore tower that costs 1,800 gems, 1,800 gems to buy. That's cool. That's what I asked before, and developers have listened. They have agreed that yes, it is now a hardcore tower, which is fair enough. However, the Necromancer has received a load of changes, not necessarily related to it being moved to hardcore, but just a load of changes. Right, so at level 0, the Necromancer's damage has been changed so that it no longer deals 15 damage, it's been changed so that it deals 10 damage. Its cooldown has been changed so that it deals fire rate at 1.5 instead of 2. Its range has been increased from 16 to 21. It's got flying detection at level 0, but I think it's always gotten flying detection. Its cost, its base cost has always remained the same at 1,650. You can only still place 3 Necromancers. Its max hits has remained the same at 1. And meanwhile, its spawn count of 1 grave has remained the same at 2. Sorry, spawns per grave. Meanwhile, the amount of gravestones, however, has decreased from 4 to 2. Also, the summon delay has decreased from like 1.2 to about 0.4, which is actually a buff. So yeah, so the delay in the Necromancer not attacking during its ability thing is actually decreased. Meanwhile, the build time used to be 1.5 seconds, it's now 0.8 seconds, so that's also a buff. Its build zone has also been from 7.5 to 6.5, but I mean, that's barely a change. Just place the Necromancer close to the path, but then its range is also increased to compensate, so it's barely a change. Furthermore, the build delay has decreased from 0.85 to 0.4, so that's if like the meter, you instantly fill up the meter. So I mean, that's barely a change. However, to get the graves to spawn, you now require 50 souls of the soul meter to get it to spawn rather than 30. Meanwhile, the graves do actually have like an explosion damage of 500, but I mean, good luck trying to get like an enemy to get the explosion in range, because I don't think it's quite difficult to do that, at least from what I've seen. I don't know, you could actually try and do it, but it's quite difficult. Meanwhile, the skeleton, the regular skeleton, its health has increased from 30 to 60, but that compensates for the fact that the gravestones have, the maximum amount of gravestones has decreased from 4 to 2, so I guess it just balances out in the end. And like technically, because the amount of souls required hasn't actually doubled, I guess it's a slight buff because the range has also increased. So yeah, I mean technically the Necromancer has just become more reliable at this stage, so it's not a nerf to this stage at least, it's just become more reliable as a tower. I mean, like, has the DPS decreased at all? Like, yeah, its DPS has decreased by 0.833. Cost efficiency has increased by 27.5. I mean, that's barely anything. Like, it's barely anything. And like, when you compensate for the fact that it's got greater range, yeah, no, it's not really much. I can't lie. Right. As for level 1, at this level, it gets 12 damage, which is a decrease from 6 that it was before. Its fire rate is a 1.2, which is a 0.8 decrease from what it was before this update. Its range has increased to 21, which is 5 more than it was before this update. Its cost is, at this level, is the upgrade cost is 1,150, which is 500 more than it was before this update. And it still can only spawn in, it can spawn in 4 graves, which is 2 lower than the 6 it could spawn in before this update. All the previous changes to the graves that I mentioned in the previous upgrade at level 0 applies here. So that's, for example, that's the build delays, that's the build zones, all of that. Yeah, that applies here. Furthermore, the Necromancer requires 60 souls to build a grave instead of 50 at this, sorry, before this update it was 30, now it requires 60. I believe it can still only spawn 60 per 60, it can only spawn in 2 per grave. So yeah, it's in regards of spawning units, it's a slight nerf, but again, the units are more powerful, so, and now you're spawning in more powerful units, 4 of them, so you're spawning in 4 more powerful units, so technically you're spawning in 2 unit, I mean, I guess two older units in terms of their health. But I mean, I guess I can see why it's a nerf, because like the damage and the fire, I mean, the damage has been nerfed a bit. Like the Necromancer has become more of a unit tower, and the units, like, less of the units spawn, and it's become, and like it takes a while for the units to recharge. Like, I guess I can see why people are thinking it's a nerf. It's different strategy required. Also at this level, it gets a max hits of 2. I mean, max hit of 2 isn't that great. It's like two enemies hit. I mean, yeah, it's better than nothing. I'm not complaining, but, you know, 2 is barely anything. Like, on a map like Grass Isles, which doesn't have many straights, it's not terribly well. A map like Toyboard, it would work better, but as Adrestria said, he's not working on maps with 90-degree paths anymore, so the Necromancer's use is going to be limited in the future. However, surprisingly, the DPS for the Necromancer has actually increased by 1 at this level. But because of the net cost increase by 500, the cost efficiency is increased to 280, so 24.4 increase of cost efficiency, and higher cost efficiency means worse tower technically, but then the units compensate for that and the higher range, so it's a rebalance of the Necromancer. Oh, and another note is if you use the ability, which is called Raise the Dead, it no longer kills all of the enemies that are already on the battlefield. So if I use the ability again here, after the cooldown expires, I no longer kill all of the enemies that appear here. So I mean, yeah, so there's no unit cap to the Necromancer. So if I were to have, like, I mean, to be fair, if the Necromancer was here, then it wouldn't be able to spawn in the graves. So it is very situational, this tower, and it's very unlike the Crook boss, which everyone is used to, because the Crook boss, that's based on a timer. This is based on damage. I mean, I guess it's more like the Engineer, but with the Engineer, the sentries aren't, like, vulnerable to, like, damage. I mean, like, situational damage. The skeletons, they mostly are vulnerable to, like, damage, and like it doesn't take a while for the graves to, like, spawn in, you know. Moving on to level 2, the damage has decreased still to 12. I still think the hidden detection here is a pre-existing upgrade. The cooldown is 1.2, which, I mean, it's still technically a buff. The range is still an increase, 24. It's still an 8 increase before this update. The cost has increased, total cost has increased to 2,200 in total. However, the maximum amount of grades is 6 at this level, so the amount of grades in total is the same. You don't need to worry about that. However, at this level, you do require 96 damage, which is a lot of hits. In my books, that's like, what, 6 max damage hits, and like, considering enemies have defense, yeah, you're not going to deal full damage to enemies, yeah, you're going to require more than 6 hits with the Necromancer. So with the gravestones, yeah, it just take a while for the graves to actually respawn, but they do deal explosive damage, so, you know, at least there's some benefit. Like 500 explosive damage, yeah, if timed right, you can deal decent damage. At this level, you can also spawn sword skeletons. They've been buffed, so their health has increased from 30 to 90. Their speed has decreased from 4 to 3.5. I think that's a buff, so they last longer. Their range has increased from 6 to 7.5. Their cooldown has remained the same, so that's their swing rate of 0.8. Their damage has remained the same at 15. They have hidden. I don't know if that's a buff. I think that's a buff. And the DPS remains the same at 18.75. But mostly overall, it's their health has increased to 90, which I think is a pretty good buff. That means they can handle, like, smaller hordes. So, like, it can fight off skeletons, its own kind, from, like, the Necromancer pretty well. Now, that being said, though, I have seen this. It does say that the spawns are kind of like, I wouldn't say they're randomized. I mean, they're weighted. So the weights aren't revealed, but here it says the normal skeletons have no set limit. Source skeletons have 3 at level 2 and then 4 at level 3. I'll get to them later. Giant skeletons have 1 at level 3. These are level 2, level 2 for the Necromancer tower. We're on level 2 currently. So the Skeleton Knight, 1 at level 3, 6 at level 4. Hello Guards, 2 at level 4. Executioner, 1 at level 4. These limits are per summon. these are no hard caps on any units. So theoretically, you could have 20 executions down in squads at any given point in time. So below is a chart of Necromancer's average DPS against a single target. These calculations make a lot of assumptions we encountered during testing. So yeah, a lot of calculations in Desmos, a common tool that I am familiar with, even though I'm not a mathematician. But yeah, this is all to say, yeah, there's quite a few stuff to say. Yeah, on average, the Necromancer at level 0 gets about 20. At level 1, it gets 27. At level 2, it's about 37. And we'll get to the later ones later. Now, at level 3, the Necromancer's tower damage has decreased from 40 to 20. So that's over a halving of the damage. However, the fire rate has been nearly halved from 1.5 to 0.8, so that's just compensated. Its range has increased from 18 to 26, so its range is like massive. Like, is this really a nerf? Like, people are saying this is a nerf, but its range is like really, really big. Then again, its build range, or like the build range of its graves, is really tiny. So I guess that's compensated, so that you have to build the Necromancer in a really tiny range, but it can shoot from like far off. Anyways, its total cost has increased a bit, so 1,820. The maximum amount of graves has decreased from 7 to 6. The maximum amount of units per grave has decreased from 5 to 2, so I think that's the amount of units that can spawn in per grave. I don't know. Meanwhile, the amount of damage required to actually spawn in the graves has increased quite dramatically. It's like what? It's 320 compared to what? How much it was before? 30? Yeah, you aren't. Yeah, it's gonna take a while to get in these graves. This is gonna take forever. Although to be fair, I think the max hits is gonna compensate quite fairly for this. That being said though, do you instantly get max it does seem like you get max graves though once you build it, because before you had to like it does. Okay, no, you don't get max graves. Okay, but seems weird. I don't know. Anyways, at this level you get the Skeleton Knight and the Hallow Guard. No, not the Hallow Guard, do you? No, just the Giant Skeleton and the Skeleton Knight. The Skeleton Knight has 600 health, 2.5 speed and 2 range. That's a buff. Oh, wait, no, that's actually the same, actually. Meanwhile, the Skeleton Knight has been buffed from 100 health to 250 health. Its speed has increased from 6 to 7.5, and its damage has increased from 40 to 90. So its DPS has actually increased from, well, it's increased by 84.62 to 138.46, but its range is tiny. So, yeah, you might not see that DPS increase for a while. But its DPS is quite big if you can spawn it in. That's why the Necromancer has such a, like, long... Or that's why it has such a high soul meter thing, because it's like it's quite a good unit. But yeah, it does take a while to like max out the grave, so yeah, just do bear that in mind. As for the tower DPS itself, the tower DPS is 25. Huh. Right, so the tower itself DPS 25, total cost 18,000, cost efficiency 722. Yeah, yeah, I can see why people complain. But again, the units. And finally, for level 4, yeah, at this level, its damage has decreased from 20 to 15, but it can attack 3 enemies. And in fact, uniquely, if there's only one enemy, so for example, if there's only like one boss enemy, the beam can concatenize into one beam and deal 45 damage towards that one boss. So actually, unlike say the mortar, which can't really concatenize its splash damage onto like one enemy, the Necromancer is quite good. But yeah, 45 damage. I mean, it's still not like the peakness, but you know, it's still quite good. Meanwhile, 32 range. 32 range is actually quite large for a tower that's a ground tower. It's like a modern day ground sniper, but yeah, a modern day sniper that's like this large. But I mean, yeah, it's not dealing with like hordes quite well, but its graves, I mean, yeah, I mean, if they weren't instantly being killed, you know, they deal with hordes quite well if you know, if you could attack over here, please, instead of just attacking over here, and if the executioner just couldn't die quickly, please. Anyways, the maximum amount of grades has actually increased from 7 to 9 at this level. Meanwhile, but the spawn count has decreased from 4 to 3. The amount of max hits, though, has decreased from 7 to 3. Meanwhile, the amount of damage required for this level to actually build the gravestones is it's 1,440. Jesus, slaughter. Whoa. For context, previously it was 30. Yeah, no, I can see why people are complaining. I mean, like, I don't think it's justified complaining. I think the Necromancer can be good, but I can understand because people haven't had much use out of the Necromancer and they don't know how to use it. It's just that with the Necromancer on its own is not a tower that's meant to be used on its own, basically. The Hallow Guard has been buffed, so its health has increased by 250 and its speed has increased by 0.6. No other changes. I think it's gotten hidden though. Meanwhile, the Executioner Skeleton, its damage has increased by 50, so its DPS has increased to 25. 2.5 is doubled, basically. Its speed has also decreased by 0.6, so it survives for longer, which is, I mean, kind of what we need for the Executioner Skeleton to survive longer, so it can attack for more. Yeah, and the raw statistics people are looking at, 37.5 damage for just the Executioner Skeleton with just its raw 15 damage. Yeah, it looks bad on paper, but let's not forget the Necromancer can concatenate the 15 damage onto one enemy, so this can be tripled. The DPS can be tripled. Additionally, this doesn't account for the units. Let's bear that in mind. Like, as you can see, for just 3 towers, the Necromancer is doing quite good damage to Patient Zero. And yes, it's 66,000, and yes, the tower would probably do better. But it's doing quite decent damage towards the Patient Zero, and I'm not even bothered trying. So yes, it's not as bad as everyone thinks. It's not been nerfed. Please don't think it's been nerfed. In fact, looking at the Desmos sheet, this is per tower. The Necromancer, it's been officially confirmed. It's 395 about average when you consider all the spawns and everything. With all the weightings and everything for each spawn, it's not RNG. It's like it's RNG removed when all the gravestones are placed down and max on a level by level basis. Spamming the ability before all graves are placed down will result in a randomized set of skeletons. RNG and units have weights and limits to balance out the removal of RNG. Weights will not be revealed. Okay, but yes, like the Necromancer hasn't been nerfed. It's just that people aren't using it correctly. Like, you have to rely on the units a lot more than you did before. And that's why they reduced the RNG of the units. So you are reliant, way more reliant on the units, which I feel like people weren't relying on the units a lot more before this update. They were relying on the tower a lot more. I mean, like, we'll see if people actually do convert over into the units, or because, like, I think the suggestion is that they want to make the soul meter fill more quickly, but they also are thinking of giving it higher damage at level 4, but we'll see. But I don't personally think the Necromancer's been nerfed. I think it's just, it performs about the same as it did before. I wouldn't use it still, but it's not worse, it's not better, it's just the same, question mark. Like, if it got the 20 damage, I think it'll be, like, slightly better. But yeah, everyone's just looking at 36.76 DPS, ignoring the fact that, yes, it spawns more consistently its units. Yeah, don't believe these people. These fools.